Hi folks, we're Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the difference between prejudice over people's behaviour or towards people who behave violently, differently, and just pure racial prejudice, purely on skin colour alone, nothing else. So we've got a situation, I guess, generally where if you disapprove of the behaviour of a minority group, assumes a racial minority, if you disapprove of the behaviour, then that's automatically branded as racism, or maybe a subset of that, not being culturally sensitive enough, and so on. But it's not racial prejudice at all. It's a prejudice towards anyone that insists on behaving very differently and disruptively, disruptively being more the operative word here. Now, there are some who say that that racism, again, purely skin color, nothing else, was a really big thing 30, 40, 50 years ago, but now it's everyone is so accepting and we're all in love and kumbaya, and so racism is very, very hard to find. But the racism hustling industry is such a big industry and so well funded. The globalists insist on it. It's a perfect wedge issue to divide and demoralize and humiliate white society, Western white society. So the globalists have to keep it going and to fund it generously. So we know that it's a political sort of scam there. But apparently today, racism has never been worse, and it's only white people can do it. And this just shows how evil Nazi, fascist, swastika, yada, yada, yada. But white people are. Now, of course, as the globalists up the mass movement of brown and black people into the West, then the local people are obviously going to obviously disapprove of that. I mean, who wouldn't? So they need a device to shut them up and silence them and shame them and guilt them and so on. And racism is just perfectly designed for that. So we need to understand that wider, race hustling architecture that goes on. Let's come back to this issue of behaviour, though. Now I'm from a business guy. I'm well travelled, and so I can't count the amount of times I've been the only white guy in the hotel, in the restaurant, in the office, in the room, on the bus, or whatever. So walking down the street, the only white guy. So I'm pretty much a I don't even think twice about it. So if people around me have different skin color, but if they behave differently, it is an issue. And then I do take issue with different behavior if it's disruptive. So I'll give a couple of examples. And that behavior, no matter who it is, I would have a frown upon it, as any reasonable person would. So now when you bring people in from a third world country, particularly rural peasants, the shock of coming to a place, a first world country, where you've got running water, flushing toilets, lights you can switch on, and so on, and these sort of things, electricity that for the most part at least is on 24/7, your own house, and you can flick a switch and the heater works or the air conditioning comes on. This is something these people have never seen before, and so all the gadgets and whatnot, they're shocked by it, and they don't know what to make of it, and the sort of that cultural shock spills over into various odd behaviours. Now I'll give an example. There's a house, I think it's about 10 houses down the road, where the government, I don't know whether it's state or federal or even local government, rents this house out on like 3-month rotations, and they put in third world or sometimes people who are coming out of drug rehab, or people who are in retarded people and things like that. So they put government sort of housing project type people in there, but whereas it used to be white people, now it's primarily, not always, but pretty much always brown and black people. So recently they put a group of black people in there. Now I don't know whether whether it's all family members or not, as far as I could tell. But it's not like mum, dad, and a kid or something like that. It's you've got like, oh shit, there must have been 8 or 9 people in that group. I'm assuming wider family, but I don't know. Given the age range from what I could see, they couldn't all have been just children. Although, some of these brown people, particularly say Pacific Islands, they it's not unusual for the boy to be 14 and the girl to be 13 when they procreate. That's not unusual for these islander people. So you can have a 30-year-old guy with a 16-year-old kid. So you look at them and think they must be brother and sister, but they're not. Anyway, they came in a large group, 8 or 9 of them, and they for the first time they've got their ghetto blaster type thing. So they're playing music until the small hours and not at a low volume. They've somehow managed to find some sort of a go-kart with a lawnmower engine on it, which is noisy as fuck, and they want to go up and down illegally. It's not registered or anything. They want to go up and down the road again at all hours. They want to stand out in the road playing football and things like that. They sit on the front porch, and scream at, talking very loud voices, and again until the small hours. I mean, they're still going at it at 2 o'clock in the morning, talking to each other, and they're both next to each other on the porch, but they seem to need to shout and scream at each other, and they get drunk, and they're laughing loudly, and they're quite disruptive. Their behaviour is such that one of the guys, I don't know how often this happens, just walked out in the front yard and just pulled down his trousers and started urinating. And this is in the street, So now you look at that and say, well, gee, that's not normal behaviour. I mean, you've got a flushing toilet in there. Maybe someone's in the toilet and it was an urgent. I mean, who knows? But to him, it was a normal thing. It's just what you do. He just sort of was looking around, and that was normal behaviour. So what I'm saying is their behaviour is very different from the accepted standard or reasonable normal standard behaviour. Now, if you make that sort of noise and ruckus at that time of morning, you can call the police, because there are noise pollution laws and things like that. But because they're recent, I don't know whether they're illegals or what they are, refugees or something, I don't know. But because they're brown and black, then the police are obviously being politically told, and it's a political decision to cut these people a lot of slack. Don't even bother them. Don't go and tell them, look, this is what's acceptable. So no one is telling these people what acceptable behaviour is. No one's saying, hey, 3 o'clock in the morning, you can't be doing a ghetto blaster thing and screaming, because as far as this was in summer, as far as they're concerned, it's hot, and they normally don't get up until midday, and normally don't go to bed until 2, 3, 4 in the morning. That's how they live in the place that they come from. Now, they've come in a different country, but why should they behave differently? They're in a different community that behaves very different from what they're used to, but they don't see that they should have to adjust, adapt, or change. They can behave, and they've got no concept of being good neighbours, or being mannerly, or being quiet and unobtrusive. That they don't have anything like that. So now, if there's this is we live near a forest, so they've got no problem in just randomly grabbing critters that are protected species under law, grabbing them and cooking them on the barbecue. But and so you hear these screams of animals being grabbed and butchered alive. And again, you can't go to the authorities to say, look, this is a protected species. If I do it, I would get a substantial fine, or if someone else did it. But again, the authorities aren't interested in holding these people accountable to acceptable standards of behaviour. So no one in the neighbourhood approves of them being there. Now, you could easily come and say, wow, racism, there you go. That just proves all you people in the neighbourhood, you're all Hitler and you're all swastika waving and da-da-da. But no, it's the behavioural difference that's the issue. If they didn't do those things, if they weren't making that noise until small, as they weren't driving those go-karts up and down the road illegally, if they weren't screaming, and they treat the road as their own playground, by the way. You're you're the one who's getting in the way if you want to use the road. That's and so they have this very tribal, we've taken over this section of the road, it's now ours, and you can, and which something they might do again, or something they do in their own country, their own rural peasant village, but you don't do it here. So there's no one coming along saying, look, guys, this is how you behave while you're here. You don't do these things. That's how it is, and there'll be penalties if you do. But no one's coming to them saying that, so they think it's fine to behave that way, and they see that if anyone objects to it, that they're the problem, not the behaviour. But it's not racism, nothing to do with racism at all. It's behavioural difference. We really need to understand that. The very, very few examples that certainly I've ever seen have been due solely to skin colour. Very few. It's behavioural differences that's the issue, and it's wrong to call that racism. And it's not accurate. But there's another example. We ran, and I've mentioned this before. We had a lot of work in the downtown thing area, and the hours were long. This is a company I've got to share in it. The hours were long, and so we wanted to be close to where the work was. So we rented an apartment for 12 months just so we could be close. It's like 5 or 10 minutes away. So now there was a block of apartments just nearby that, again, another one of these things where the government rents certain apartments in there and then sticks asylum seekers and alleged refugees. And again, we're talking about third world, a whole community. They don't. If they put them in small numbers, it probably would work. They just put 2 people in the apartment, but instead they move a whole bunch of them into the same apartment block and plenty of them per apartment. And you'd say, well, that's saving a bit of money. Instead of having 3 apartments to house these people, they're just shoving them all into one. So I do get that. But anyway, so they're all these brown people are in there. Again, they've come straight from a third world country and bang into a first world country. And there was a park, same again, noisy until the small hours, screaming and shouting on the balconies at each other. They have they can't they prepare food in the same way as they did in their peasant. So they put a big chopping board in the middle of the floor, chop up all the meat and the vegetables, and so you constantly got this noise going. And the machetes type thing to chop the food up. So there was a park just across the road, quite a nice park. It had barbecue areas to sit out, had like an outdoor gym and this sort of stuff there. So it was a pleasant place to go. But these people decided that park belonged to them and it was their property. So they would descend on it, and then other people from their tribe and race would descend on it, and they would, as a wider group, just take over the park. And you were not allowed. Anyone else just was not allowed to use that park while they were there. And so if you went to, I would often go to the outdoor gym, but if they were in the park, they would spot you going towards the gym, and then a number among their group, a number would run to the gym equipment, and one each would sit on each or stand on each bit of gym equipment, and then look at you with much hostility, by the way. It was letting you know, hey, this whole park, including anything in it, belongs to us. So while we're here, so it's very tribal, very third world, and very basic, animalistic, type view of the world. But that was it. You couldn't walk through the park. If you tried to walk through the park to shortcut through, that they would come along and try and block you. Of course, if you push them out the way, then you're the aggressor, and they're just the victims. But this behaviour was very different. And no one would approve of it. I mean, in their own country, maybe that's how things are all the time. But it was their behaviour. So there was no racism here. They behaved very differently. They behaved aggressively, violently, and again would just take over areas of it. Like the people I mentioned, they would take over part of the street. These guys were taking over the park. So it's essential that if we're going to make any use of this debate, which is used cynically by the globalists to shame, blame, humiliate, and undermine the social cohesion of white society. So we need to recognise that. But we also, and this is very, very important, sane and sensible and reasonable people need to separate behavioural differences from just so-called racial prejudice. I don't see examples of racial prejudice. I've been around for a while now, and I don't see. I see behavioural differences, but not prejudice. Prejudice based on behaviour and difficult behaviour, disruptive behaviour. But I don't see purely racial prejudice. We really need to separate the two if the debate is ever going to be meaningful. You've been with Tassos today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.